Welcome back to Lila the podcast. I'm your host, Alexa, and today I have a very special guest with me, and his name is Mike, but to me and a few other people, he's Dad.
Well, thanks for having me, Alexa.
Welcome
I'm really
on the
glad to be here.
podcast.
I've been looking forward to this. I've seen all the other people come through your podcast guest list, and I was wondering when my chance was going to come up.
Dad, you know you were top of the list, but you are booked and busy. I could hardly get this appointment in. We have to have time to sit down in the library, as you can see, and just really hash it out,
Yeah, yep. Well, we're in the right place. Yeah. This is where I sit every morning to start my day and hash it out.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on. There's so many things that I feel like you would be great to have on for. I think that you should have your own podcast, and I think that we could do every week, the two of us could talk about stuff, but that's just not really feasible. So it'll be fun to have you on for a couple episodes, but for this first one, we just got to let people get to know you.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, where do you want me to start? How far back should I go?
The dawn of time.
Well, let me see. Well, as you know, I turned 60 last year. That was kind of a big deal for me because I can no longer claim to be young. I don't even know if I can claim to be middle-aged anymore. And I'm not fully adjusted yet. But I did kind of use that as an opportunity to capture and celebrate everything about my life and my family and my hobbies. And they all kind of came together on that day when I threw that party for myself. I think something that I've always tried to do ever since I was a little kid is be a little kid. And if you remember the way I advertised my birthday party, it was what was it?
You don't remember the way you advertised your birthday. It was
it was the 49th anniversary of my 11th birthday. Because nobody celebrates birthdays after 11. It's not a big deal anymore, but I think it's a big deal. But the things that fill my life are my work. I really enjoy my work. I've worked at Anderson Windows for over 38 years now. Always been a great place to work. It's always been a place where I could have a creative outlet and do the kind of work that I like. I've been very lucky in that way. It's a great company, and I'm a hard worker, but I'm also very lucky. Then, of course, you guys, my kids, keeping relationships with you and keeping you guys as close as I can when you're in the country. It's a little harder when you're out of the country. That's important to me. So, having Dominic living here, having you guys all live close by is really important to me, and I really enjoy that. And having the rest of my family nearby. Everybody in my family, my brothers and sisters, all live within 50 miles. And so that's an important thing to me. And then my hobbies that keep me busy are, of course, karate. I've been doing that for over 30 years. And done a lot of teaching, I've done coaching, I've done competition, I've coached our competition team, I've had many exams and many belts, and I'm kind of coming to the end of setting goals in that area of my life. I'm still going to do karate for as long as I can pick my foot up off the ground, but I think I'm kind of done with trying to, I'm not going after any more trophies or any more belts. I think that's it.
Yeah. And what degree black belt are you, Master Schaefer?
5th degree black belt. And at 5th degree, that's when in our organization you're assigned the rank of master. And part of that comes from, just being able to master certain physical techniques. But a big part of it is because I've trained and coached and been a leader at our school for many years also. So part of it is certainly the physical accomplishment, but a big part of it is the contributions I've made to the martial arts and that I made to the Edge here in Stillwater.
And I'm actually a Nepo baby in the karate world because I was the first of your small karate kids, which was called Little Dragons.
That's right. You were the very first little dragon.
I was the first little dragon, and I was devastated when I found out that I found one of those little kid gis at a thrift store by the dump in Hawaii. Why was my Little Dragons uniform there? I thought that was made specially for us. But I will have you know, because I know you might worry about it a little bit when I go travel the world by myself, I do sometimes tell people that I have a black belt by association, and that usually does the job. Nobody really questions it. They don't want to find out.
Well, I'm glad that's working for you, Alexa. That's really not how we assign the belts. There's a little more to it than that. But we do teach that sometimes all the karate you need to know is that hi-ya and that strong position. Some of those basic things we teach right out of the chute. You can fool people into thinking you have more than you do.
Which is exactly what you teach me in our self-defense classes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's one of the times it's okay to lie.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've learned. It's okay to lie sometimes. Did you know? That's what sometimes, like when I meet other girls solo traveling, sometimes they're like, well, you know, I didn't know what to say. Or I even been in a situation myself where I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I just tell them the truth? Bottom line, did you forget that you can lie?
Well, I'm not a traveler like you are. So I'm not sure how to advise you in that. Normally I'd say it's rarely okay to lie. It's a slippery slope. But anyway, to finish out my hobbies, the other thing, you know, that I've done ever since I got out of college, and one of my greatest passions, things I enjoy most, is sailing. And so I sailed for many years out of college when we had the cabin out on Moonlight Bay, and then had to give that up for, it wasn't quite 10 years, but when I was able to buy another sailboat 5 years ago, Carpe Diem, and start sailing again.
You had a little one before that.
Yeah.
You got the magic carpet.
Oh, that's right. I did. Mm-hmm. I did have a sailboat for a while before that. Yeah, that didn't work out.
Yeah, that every time we tried to go out, there wasn't really wind.
Yeah, and it just, the situation didn't work out. But this new situation, having the boat on the river, having it big enough to bring people along and sleep on, is a whole new adventure. And that's where I take a lot of my time, and that's where I'm going to keep taking more of my time. So those are the things that make me, my work, my family, martial arts, sailing. Oh, and biking is something I've discovered probably within the last, I don't know, I guess it'd have to be like 10 years. Because when I moved to Woodbury and I had free time on my hands, and there's all those bike trails.
Yeah.
Started riding a bike around and discovering how much ground you can cover on a bicycle. So that's been a lot of fun too.
That's one thing a middle-aged man loves, a bicycle. There's something about it. The second they hit middle age, they want to be on a bicycle. I remember that. I remember that switch. All of a sudden, you wanted to go biking all the time.
Yeah.
But now that I think about that, that was back when we lived in the townhome and you didn't have a sailboat.
No, I didn't have a house that took a lot of time. I didn't have a boat. I just had a lot of free time on my hands. Mm-hmm. And
we were still going back and forth between.
Yeah, you guys weren't spending as much time with me, and there's so many bike trails, and I discovered how many places in the Twin Cities you can get to on a bicycle. Mm-hmm. And so that's turned out to be quite a passion now with my annual bike trips. I usually do 1 or 2 overnight bike trips a year, and they aren't athletic adventures at all. They're social adventures with all my friends.
I feel like it was an athletic adventure. Didn't you go like 50 miles or something this last weekend?
It was 70 miles.
Oh.
But it was over 3 days. And there were a lot of stops along the way.
I know, but every time I've gone for a bike ride with you, I think it's going to be like a fun, leisurely thing, and you're leaving me in the dust. But I do like our bike rides because we usually bike to a brewery, and then, well, we used to have to call my brother to come pick us up, but now he's of age, so that's out.
Yeah, well, you have to have both. You know, there's work, and then you have to have fun. Mm-hmm. Balance. It's one of those lessons from the martial arts, too. And that's the other thing that's important to understand if you really want to understand why I live my life the way I do, is sailing and karate are both things that they're just beautiful metaphors for life. Everything you take that you learn, to learn how to sail a sailboat, you can apply those lessons to how you get through your life. There are things about the martial arts that you learn how to get a black belt. Once you've accomplished that, you can apply those same principles to accomplish anything. And that's what's beautiful about those things. And I think that's why I've stuck with both those things for so long. And I will still stake with them until I am simply physically not able to do them anymore. I know you don't like to talk about death, but if I die...
No, you're never going to, and you never get to.
But if I die while I'm doing karate or sailing... or even cycling. That'd be all right.
At least you'll be making people jealous. That's what it's all about.
I'll die.
Another thing you taught me. First, you can lie. Second of all, it's all about making other people jealous.
Oh, Alexa, I don't think you paid attention enough when you read my book.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
The other thing, I want to finish this with you when you're telling me about yourself. Something I started doing when I first got my black belt, and I also started doing it at work, is teaching every chance I got. Because I like to get in front of people and teach. And I like the principles of martial arts, the principles of sailing, and the principles of project management, which is my career, all those things apply to life. And I just feel kind of driven to share that. And so that's something I've always tried to work into my job and into my personal life, into the things I volunteer in. And now, as you know, I'm starting to develop a business for when I retire, where I'm going to continue to teach and train, not just project management, but other life skill, principle-based things to help people figure out how to live their lives. So that's my latest passion, the latest thing I'm focusing on and developing.
Yeah. You always have a new thing that you're diving into. Yeah. And actually, one thing that you forgot to mention recently, yard art. Oh. I feel like I've been meaning to do this, but going on a yard art tour in your yard. Every time I come over here, he has a new piece of yard art, and I'm not talking about like a little painted stone in the garden. No, he's got like metal dragons and a dinosaur and my favorite one though. Do you want to know what my favorite one is, Dad? And my favorite one is the one that's a post with a ton of signs that point all different places, and that they have like, you know, the captain's lounge, which is your yacht. Yeah. Sailboat. That is, you know, it points to where the marina is, and then...
Right. Any place that's important in my life, I made a sign, and it points that direction out on that signpost out in my side yard. And that's a reminder to me of what's important to me, too. Yeah. And it's a reminder, not everybody has seen it yet, but when my family comes over and they'll see, oh, that points to my place. They'll know. Now, you guys haven't stopped moving, so I don't have any arrows pointing to you and Dominic and Alexa and Kiara yet. Yeah. But if you ever settle down, maybe I will.
You should just get one of those things that are from, you know, like those things on the top of barns or farmhouses that's just an arrow that goes. Yeah. You should get that, and that's for me. I just go where the wind takes me.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that was kind of beautiful.
That was. It was. It was a sailing metaphor. Isn't that interesting?
Just comes to me.
That applies to life.
But yeah, so we'll have to do a yard art tour, probably a sailboat tour, and I'll pop in an image of the signpost if I can figure that out technologically.
Oh yeah, that shouldn't be too hard.
And one of the questions that I sent you, kind of jokingly, but I mean, we're kind of going to answer it in talking about the book, but how did you become the best dad ever?
Well, I actually have given that considerable thought, and I would not claim to be the best dad ever. As a matter of fact, the reason I wrote that book is because I didn't feel like I was being the best dad ever, and I want to make sure I left something behind. It actually, the way I approach parenting, and the reason I am the dad you know, is there's a couple things that influence that. One of them, when I was younger, I would see kids, and I would grow up and see how people behaved. And I kind of had this judgmental attitude, like, why is that kid acting that way? Why don't his parents do something about it? And I had this idea in my head that when I had kids, I was going to teach them how to be, you know, good little human beings. I've just always thought that. And it's, like I said, it's a little self-absorbed, judgmental kind of thing. Like, how did I know? How did I think I knew what I was doing? But, you know, when I was a young man, I thought I did. That all changed, you know, usually with the first diaper change. You go, whoa, I did not know what I was getting into. Mm-hmm. But I did hang on to that as you guys were growing up. You remember this a little bit painfully. I tried to teach you things. I always tried to teach you stuff, maybe a little earlier than you needed to know. Like Kiara, of course, is adopted, but when she first moved in with us, she was 3 years old. I taught her how to make her bed. And some people give me a hard time about teaching a 3-year-old how to make her bed. But that was the beginning of teaching her how to do stuff and how to get by on her own. And I tried to do that with all of you, push you a little bit into those uncomfortable places so you learn how to do stuff. And there was a philosophy there I heard somewhere: you should never do anything for somebody that they can do for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that kind of fed into the title of the chapter in my book about how to be a parent, which is treat your children like you won't have them tomorrow. Train them like they won't have you. So I was trying to train you so you'd be able to take care of yourself when I'm not around or when I'm not available. Mm-hmm. But I hope you also remember the first part. Treat your children like you won't have them tomorrow. And that's because I love to play. I love being a little kid, and I love doing what little kids do. Well, that's why you see a big part of the reason I have the art and the decor in my yard that seems a little bit quirky. But I also think it's wonderful. It's the magical wonderland. You know, it's an unusual place to be here. And I just think it's fun. Like, you know, having that sign out on my tree there that says, watch for falling coconuts. We're in Minnesota. We're not in the tropics. But for a moment, we can pretend we are. If you look at that parakeet hanging next to it, you know, you're there.
You fooled me.
So anyway, I hope you remember that stuff. You know, we didn't swim out to the raft out at the lake. We swam out to Mount Wanahakaluki, you know. And whenever we went to Marine to get snacks, you know, at the general store there, I always drove you by that cave. And we looked at that cave. We thought, oh, that's scary and mysterious. We got to go visit that someday. I just think that's important to keep that childlike wonder in your life. And so that's part of what I built into being a parent. And it's so easy because kids always want to do it if you just take the time for it.
Yeah. It's a lot of those things that really actually make a much bigger impact than you think. Like driving past that cave, you probably could hardly even go in it. I mean, it was just like a hole in the wall of rock. But every time we'd say, Dad, we go to the cabin. We point out the cave. Did we miss it? Did we miss it? I don't know why we wanted to see it so bad, but it's because every time we went past it, you pointed out, you said, ooh, that's the cave. And I remember we would drive past and I'd think about it and I'd think about what's in there and what you might find in there and the bats and all of that. And one time you and Tabby said you were going to go in there and I was so scared. I was like, please don't go to the cave. You were never going to go. But things like that. And then, I mean, kind of the more like harder things that at the time I was like, seriously? That you said, like, don't do anything for your kids that they could do for themselves. One of them I remember is like, if we didn't put a plate in the dishwasher and you were standing right there, I was all the way up in my room, you'd yell from downstairs, hey, whose plate is this? Come down, take care of it. Like, you're closer, just do it. I'll learn my lesson. I wouldn't have learned my lesson though. So now as an adult, when I want to just like get up and walk away from my plate on the table, I'm like, nope, because I'm going to have to come do this later when I don't want to. And I also have a roommate, and I'm, like, very mindful of that. But if I live by myself, or when she's gone for the weekend, things are a little bit different.
Or maybe you wouldn't have a roommate, because she'd say, Alexa, you're such a slob. I can't be your roommate.
True. I did have to have a roommate growing up, which was my sister. So I guess I did learn how to live with somebody else, which at the time I thought, why can't I just have my own room? But it did help me learn how to like live with somebody else.
The other thing that's really important in how I act as a parent is what my parents gave to me. For, you know, my whole life, I've always had a home, had a safe place. I knew there was always a safe place where there was food and shelter and love. I've always had that. I have never doubted that the entire time, you know, right up until my parents died last year. I knew I had a home I could go back to. My mom, even in her struggles toward the end of her life, oh, you're coming up? Can I fry you a hamburger? Can I make you some lunch? Are you coming for a visit? Always, right till the end. They were just always there. They lived in the same house for 50 years, nearly 50 years. And prior to that, you know, we moved around a little bit because of my dad's work. But that's what they did. They made this absolutely solid, steady place. And there are things that they hung on the walls and things, you know, there are things in that home that are always there. It was like a rock. And that gave me great comfort, not just the home or the physical place, but them always being there and always being inviting and welcoming and warm. And so that's what I've always wanted to give you. I want you guys to always come home. I always want you to always feel like you can come home and have a place to stay that's safe, and there'll be food and shelter. And I want it to be familiar to you. You may not have noticed this, but we moved out of Delano Way and moved into the townhome where we had to live for a while, and then we had to move to another townhome and live for a while, and now I finally live here. There's a lot of the same stuff hanging on the walls. There are a lot of the same things in these places, and I do that deliberately so that you'll always feel like home a little way, and it'll always be comfortable for you. And that's just that's what made me feel so secure my whole life, and I want you guys to feel that secure all your life. So I hope you feel that way, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, you definitely have created that, and the same way that you feel about your parents' house, and I feel it about Ronnie and Barbie's house to a degree, but also differently because they're my grandparents versus being your parents. Like, that was your home that you grew up in. But this does feel like cozy, and you do have like the knickknacks and the lots of different things on the walls that probably a lot of people wouldn't hang up in their house, you know?
Yeah.
And some of it's a little bit funky, like this Africa animal table that I'm looking at. But, that was actually in Ronnie and Barbie's house.
Right.
It's just stuff that does create that feeling of coziness and warmth and safety. Like, I always feel safe at Dad's, and I always feel like, okay, it's going to be okay. And that's part of who you are, and like the aura that you have and the energy that you have, but also the space that you've created here too. And so I'm really, really grateful to have that. And, you know, I'm not joking when I say that. I think that you're the best dad ever. And that's just the truth. And I think that when you're a kid, that you don't really realize that your parent is learning and growing too. Because now that I'm 25, I think about the fact that it's normal for someone my age to have a child. Like, people my age, people I graduated high school with, do have children. They have multiple. They, you know, there's, like, even just a few years ago, if I saw someone online that was like 23, 24 announcing their pregnancy, I wouldn't think much of it. And now it's crazy. And so, you know, you think about people my age are being parents, like, you're so young. You're still learning and growing. And I know that you and Mom were a bit older when you started having kids than I am now. But still, like, looking back at that too, I think that you're a different person and dad now than you were in my early childhood, and than you were in my preteens and my teens, and when I was in college, and now. Like, there's different stages. And, you know, I think a big part of that also has to do with, like, your own level of peace and happiness in your own life too. Like, since the divorce, I think that both you and my mom are different parents than you were when you were together. And that's very likely because you guys couldn't agree. You couldn't agree on the way that you wanted things done, or this or that. But it's really, really special, and I'm really grateful that I have you, because you're like anything anyone could ever want in a parent.
Well, I appreciate that, Alexa. It's kind of sad that, you know, by the time you're all grown up and completely out on your own and having kids of your own, I will have figured it out completely. It's, you know, that it just won't matter. It's too bad parents don't get that training earlier in their life. But I don't know. I think when I think just about parenting and the way your mother and I parented you kids when you were younger, earlier in our marriage, it was a little bit more straightforward, and we agreed on a set of principles about how to do things and who should do what. You know, if I was working more than she was, and she took on a little bit more traditional role, and that worked really well for a few years, and we agreed on things. But it's a complex world that we live in, and it's really hard. It's really hard. Being a parent is really hard. That's about it. You don't know if you're doing anything right. And again, that's a big part of why I wrote that book, is I came to the end of, I don't know, after getting divorced and kind of taking the time it took to get stable, I think, financially, emotionally, professionally, spiritually stable. And I reflected on everything. I thought, oh, wow. Like I told you, I meant to say a lot of different things, a lot more things than what I said. And writing the book was actually, as I was reflecting on this today, I certainly would like to put it in your hands and have it be useful and valuable to you. But it was as much for me as anything else. It was a very cathartic experience. And I kind of think it was a way of forgiving myself for any parenting mistakes I made. I'm sure you can't think of any, but I may have made some along the way. The dish thing wasn't one of them.
Well, we've been talking about, I did mention at the begining that you wrote a book for us, but I haven't directly straightforward talked about what it is, so, do you know why I brought you here today?
Do you want to hear about my book?
What I Meant to Say by Michael Schaefer There are only 4 copies in rotation. Or at least let me believe that, because I really like that it's just for us.
Sorry to tell you this, but I made 10 copies because there was a minimum printing number. But I've told so many people about it, and I've handed out a few copies to people that were interested. So I don't have a copy anymore.
What?
All I have is the PDF version. I don't have a copy of my own. As a matter of fact, that's Dominic's copy.
No, this is mine.
Oh.
I brought it.
Well, that's Dominic's. I knew you were going to ask questions about it, so I thought I better freshen up on it.
Well, just so my audience knows, it was back in 2018 on Father's Day, and this...
Was it 2018 or was it 2019?
It was 2018, because I went back and checked.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted this to be a Father's Day episode, but my dad's busy. So it's just going to be a regular episode.
Yeah.
But for Father's Day, actually, my dad gave us a gift, and he had spent... How long did it take you to write this?
From the time I got the idea and decided I really wanted to do it, it was about 5 years. But from the time I actually, started writing it on the computer and organizing the chapters, it was about a year. That last year is what I spent doing it. Prior to that, it was just ideas and notes and little things.
So my dad wrote us a book about life, basically, called What I Meant to Say. And I want to talk about like the main points in the chapters, but I think there's plenty of it that I would like for it to leave for us. But I just think this is the most special, precious thing that I'll cherish forever. And I read it probably at least once a year. I don't know exactly. I've read it many times. It's quick, easy read, 60 pages, very digestible. And that was one of the things you said, you want to be able to read it in one sitting. Do you want to just read the introduction of why you wrote the book?
I'd rather not read it. I'd rather just tell you it, because that's kind of long.
Okay.
But and I think I've kind of talked about it a little bit. I always wanted, ever since I was young, and I knew I was going to have kids someday, I always wanted to teach them stuff. I wanted to teach them how to live their life. I didn't want to just be, I don't know, any other dad who goes to a job and comes home and sits on the couch and drinks a beer. I like that too, but
sounds like a Wednesday night.
But I want to make sure I taught you something, and you went out into the world ready, prepared. So that's kind of what drove me to do it. And then when when you guys are all growing up, and the divorce completely turning our whole life upside down, and prior to that we had kind of a stable, normal life, and I thought, I lost a lot of ground. The only way I can make it up is if I write it down. And I had this list of principles, and I've always loved quotes, and I've always loved principle-centered leadership and trying to figure out why life is the way it is, what makes things tick. And so I'm always collecting quotes. I got books of quotes, and I narrowed it down to my 7 favorite quotes about life. And that's what the titles of the chapters are. They're all cliches, and they're also, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but they are in the order that you should learn them. That's why they're in the particular order, except for the 7th chapter and the 8th chapter, which are at the end, but they should really be at the beginning. But nobody could possibly understand those concepts at the beginning. So I put them in the order that they could be applied and they should be used. Anyway, that's the way. That's why they are the way they are. And that's why I wrote it. I wrote it because I didn't say all that stuff, and everything in there is what I meant to say, what I should have said, what I should have taught you.
We don't have to go too in depth about each chapter, but I do want to touch on each of them. So you said in the order that you're supposed to learn them. This is the Magnificent 7. Okay, well, maybe I should first learn how to read.
Yeah, the Magnificent 7. That's actually when I found the 7 quotes or those 7 statements, I put them on a poster, or just I printed them out and I hung them on my cube at work just to kind of remind me of what's important. That was the beginning of it. And some guy, one of my coworkers, came over and he's looking at it. He goes, "Oh, that's really cool. Can I get a copy of that?" I gave it to him, and I thought, maybe I'm onto something.
Am I a genius?
But that's where it started, was just me putting something on the wall to remind me. And then, the book is the story of why all those things are important to me, why I believe they're important to you, everybody.
Yeah. So chapter 1 is use it or lose it. What does that mean? What are you talking about
That's
there?
basically about the operation of your life. Your body, your mind, your heart, and your soul. If those things are not in shape, it's like having a car that's not maintained. You can't get anywhere. So if you don't keep those things maintained, it's like the first order of business: survival, maintenance, get everything fine-tuned. So in there I talk about physical fitness, diet and exercise, mental fitness, always learning, always training yourself, emotional fitness, taking care of your relationships and your feelings, and how to manage, your emotions, which drives everything. And then of course spiritual fitness too. How do you stay connected with God? Or if you don't believe in God, how do you stay connected with the power that's out there? It's hard. Well, I can't really speak to somebody who truly doesn't believe in God or a supreme force of some kind. But staying connected to all those things enables everything else. And if you're having trouble in your life, in all the other wonderful things you want to do, you can typically trace it back to letting one of those things go. And so that's why I think that's the first thing. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And
I don't always do everything in there, by the way.
Yeah, me neither.
That's why I wrote what I meant to say.
I should probably read that chapter again. And chapter 2, be the friend you want to have.
Well, the next thing is one of my profound beliefs. It's not the quote on the chapter, but it's at the end of the book. It's the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the relationships in your life. So once you get your own self taken care of, everything else you do, in chapter 1, everything else you do is going to be as a result of some kind of interaction with somebody else. In your school, with the teacher, or with your friends, in your work, your social life, anything you do, you have to interact with people. And so that's why that's so important. And as a lifelong introvert, this is one of those things I'll never master. I can only manage it. Interacting with people has always been a challenge for me. I was always shy, always quiet. The kind of conditioning and training and counseling and coaching that I have to take just to sit here and have a conversation with you that might be seen by other people or heard by other people is enormous. It is not natural for me.
It seems so natural now.
Well,
do you feel a lot more comfortable with it now because it's something you've practiced a lot?
Yeah, because I know how to do it because I've applied some science to it. I'll tell you a little bit about that later too.
Chapter something.
Well, it's a chapter I haven't read yet, written yet. But anyway, that's what that's about. And a lot of times in my life, I didn't experience something or didn't do something because I was kind of waiting for somebody to invite me or somebody to show me or somebody to take me along. And I realized that the only way I can be sure that the things that I want to happen in my life happen is if I'm that person, if I'm that friend, that leader, that teacher, that boss, that employee, that partner, and whatever it happens to be. And so once that kind of clicked for me, anytime I had a problem that involved a relationship, it's like, how would I want that person to be? If I was, I go to a party and I'm the only one, I don't know anybody or I don't know many people or I'm there alone. Say, what would I want somebody to do? What do I want somebody to do for me? Well, I'm going to go do that for somebody else. And that just started opening doors for me. Mm-hmm. Doors that are not open to introverts typically.
Yeah.
I'm a I don't know what you call it, a fake extrovert. I can imitate an extrovert long enough to get out and have some fun. And so now I do an awful lot of social things that I drive. I being single, that helps drive it, because it seems like people that are in couples automatically get invited to stuff. It's so much easier to do things as couples. If you're single, you don't get invited to that much. So I make stuff happen. This bike trip that I was on last weekend, there's one other guy that I partner with that kind of helps plan these things. But most of these other guys would never leave their homes if somebody didn't invite them. And they love it. They appreciate it so much when somebody does that, when somebody is the friend they want to have, the one who plans things, who organizes, who draws them in. And all I have to do is bring people together, and then I don't have to do anything. Yeah. Everything takes care of itself. You wouldn't believe the experiences that we've had on these bike trips that are not planned. I just do the structure to bring some people together, and we meet people, and we have adventures, and we ride in the rain, and we hide in the bars in the rain, and we meet strange people. We were at this place last weekend we got there just before it rained, and so we're stuck there because the rain is pouring down, and we don't want to ride our bikes in the rain. Well, we weren't the only bike gang there, but the other bike gang came in on motorcycles. And, so you meet people that you might not meet any other way. The other thing, that I've done with that is like, that sailboat has turned out to be a way to bring people in, a lot of people are curious about sailing, but nobody really wants to do it. And it's really hard to just go out and start sailing on your own. I mean, I did it. I bought a boat when I got out of college and taught myself how to sail. But if somebody knows somebody like me who can take them out there, suddenly there's a whole new world of stuff you can do just because you create that, I want to go sailing. I want to have this sailing experience of being on a boat with a bunch of friends and enjoying that kind of river tropical lifestyle. And so I created it, and people come along.
Well, I've learned that a lot from you for sure, because I think I also am somebody, people think I'm an extrovert and I'm not. I'm an introvert. I very much like my time alone, but after a while, like, everybody needs that human connection, kind of itch for it. And I think my natural tendency is actually more to be shy. Especially if there's somebody that is more, outgoing than me or energetic or something like that. Like, definitely my inside self would want to shrink down. And it's hard because I also have this element of my mom in me that she is very just like, she'll go in and talk to anybody. And so I thought growing up that that's who I was. And so that's who I would make myself be. And I think as I grew older and learned more about myself, I learned that I'm actually more like you in that sense. But I thought that I had to be, or that I was that person that I wasn't. And so with that, like, and meeting a lot of new people, especially like going into college or definitely solo traveling or just, meeting new people through other people, I would think, I'd wish like they would introduce us or something like that. Like, this feels awkward. And instead of that, now I just say, I don't think we've met before. I'm Alexa. What's your name? Like, especially like, let's say new coworker walks in. I'm like, we haven't worked together before. I'm Alexa, instead of just like that awkwardness of, we haven't introduced ourselves yet, this or that. And that happens a lot in solo traveling. One of the things that is like the hardest part, and you have to start over every couple of days because you go to a new hostel, you go to a new city, whatever, but is just being able to just walk up to a group of people and say, hey guys, mind if I sit? Or like, hey, I'm Alexa, what's your name? Like, so hard. You get used to it by the end. By the end, you're just like, yeah, we're already friends. You haven't even heard their name yet. Or you could end up spending a whole day with somebody and be like, yeah, I actually forgot your name at noon, but it's 7 p.m. now and it's too late to ask. So that's definitely something that I learned from you. And also just the, like, if you want it to happen, making it happen. But for me, I do feel like sometimes that can get hard because I'm like, I don't want to have to be the one that always plans it. Or like, I don't want to just be the friend that I want to have. I want to have the friend that I want to have. And how do you deal with that if you don't feel like you're getting that back in return? Does it matter to you?
That is definitely a problem, especially since what I've discovered has happened is now that I've established myself as somebody who kind of leads and organizes social events, people expect me to do it unless people step up to do it.
Yeah, same.
So I've kind of filled the gap. But that's kind of how it is. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of beat yourself up about, or, I don't know, feel bad about that and go, I wish somebody would do something for me. Mm-hmm. Or you can just keep being the friend you want to have, keep being the person you want to be, keep doing what you're doing, keep going after what you want, and try not to worry about that. It's another way of giving. And I find that if you're giving of yourself in some way, it's always satisfying. What I really find that I need to do now is, instead of waiting around for somebody to invite me to something, now what I do is I just make sure I take time to be alone, because I need a little more alone time mm-hmm. than some people do. Mm-hmm. The other thing I do that might be useful to you, I was just thinking about this last week, is when somebody does invite me to something, I bend over backwards to make sure I go. even if it's something. A friend of mine called me a couple weeks ago, a guy I went to high school with. We don't get together all that often, but he said, hey, my wife's out of town. I got nothing to do. What are you doing this weekend? Should we get together? And I had a million things to do at work, stuff to catch up on, all this kind of stuff. And I just, I didn't think about it too long ago. I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. What day, what time? And we kind of, figured something out. And so when that happens, and if somebody calls me and invites me to do something and I go, now I've secured the next invitation. And so now I have because that happens, I've got a half a dozen of friends that are kind of in that space. And so whenever they call me to do something, I do whatever I can to go, because it's always fun. And then I'm always kind of creating that opportunity for somebody else to kind of plan something for me to do.
So, chapter 3.
So we're talking about chapter 3. If you plan to, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And it's about goal setting in its simplest form. But I actually heard that expression at a restaurant when, before we ordered, the server came around and walked the dessert tray. And normally, if you're at one of those restaurants where they walk the dessert tray, they wait until after you've eaten to bring it by. But he didn't want to do that because he didn't want us full. He said, as he's bringing the dessert tray by, he says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, my friends, and dessert is something you need to plan for. And so it just stuck in my head. And it's a very simple concept. But, Red Lobster, I like to get the steak and the shrimp and, those biscuits. Remember those Cheddar Bay biscuits?
Oh, how could I forget?
Well, you don't have room for dessert after that. Unless you've seen a dessert ahead of time and you think, maybe I'll just get the steak and not the shrimp this time. You plan.
Who knew such a profound life lesson was going to come from Red Lobster?
Yeah. The other thing that kind of sticks with, the statistical support for this is if you read studies of the most successful and accomplished and wealthiest people in the world, and one of the common things they have is a set of written goals. So simply writing goals down is one of the things that makes things happen. Even if you ever accomplish all your goals, just the act of writing them and the process that you go through of planning and trying to act on something drives you in a direction that you wouldn't go any other way, even if you don't get that particular goal done. Now I've taken that too far. I've made goals upon goals with lists upon lists and plans upon plans. But I've also accomplished a lot of things that I set out to. It typically takes longer than I think it's going to take, and I don't always get the end that I want to get to. But starting with the plan at least gets you moving in the right direction. And I think that's more important. Always moving in a particular direction, because the alternative is to not move. Or if you do move, to go around aimlessly. So it is worth taking some time to figure out what you want out of your life, what you want out of your week, what you want out of your month, what you want out of your job, and write it down and figure it out. And you can do it as simple as I wrote in the book, which is piece of paper. Write it down on a couple of pieces of paper. Some people accomplish their goals by putting Post-it notes on their mirror and just looking at them every day. They don't do anything else. But that's like one of the most common success strategies I've ever heard. And some people have detailed goal plans with schedules and timelines and PowerPoint slides and stuff like that. That's what I have. You don't need all that. But just making a plan and working towards it, even if you constantly adjust the plan, even if you constantly change direction, you're always working towards something. And then you'll find the lesson that I'm going to put in my next book. Actually, I put it in my next book called The Hamburger Card. I don't know if you've read that one.
I have read that one.
We'll have to do another podcast on that one.
Okay.
But that one's about the journey. It doesn't matter so much what the goal is or what you accomplish or that end point. What matters is what happens to you on the way, because that's where the fun is. It's kind of like the bike trip. We used to drive from St. Croix Falls to Danbury, or ride. And the goal was to get to Danbury, the casino, It's got the bright lights, and when you roll in there and it's just getting dark and you're beat up and you're mosquito bitten and you're wet because it was raining and you're probably a little bit drunk because you stopped at too many bars on the way. It's such a relief to get there. But the trip is what made it worth it. We could have driven there.
Yeah, true. You wouldn't feel the same about the Danbury Casino if you drove there.
That's right.
Huh.
That's
so
right.
True. I need to revisit this chapter because I've been feeling stagnant.
Well, I think it'll help. And it's very simple.
Chapter 4. Do what you love and the money will follow. I've really been applying this one lately. Money yet to follow. Doing what I love.
Yeah. Now you have to take that with a grain of salt. And some purists say that, and they say go after it and dream and follow your dreams and all that. And I'm all for that, but you've got to be practical too. And what I discovered, and I'm not sure if I illustrated it that well in the book. That's one chapter I might rewrite. The rest of them are perfect, but that one I might rewrite because I don't think I got the message across. But in every job I've had, I mean, I worked in the factory at Anderson Windows for 4 summers in college and then 2.5 years afterwards. But I found ways to bring things I liked to do into my job, even when I was working in the factory. And as a matter of fact, because I was doing that, I created a job for myself in the factory as a schedule coordinator. I just kept offering to help the supervisor coordinate a couple things and come off the factory line and be like an assistant scheduler. And that job didn't exist. So suddenly I made up a job. And that was what got me, that experience is what got me to the top of the list to get into an office job. And then every time I got into the office, you do the administrative work that you need to that's part of your job. But I tried to build in the kind of stuff I liked. I liked analyzing things. I liked looking at data. I like making charts and graphs. I like organizing things. So I'm kind of lucky that way. That stuff applies to all jobs. But I've always been able to take part of my job and make it into something I love, even if the whole job wasn't good. And as a result of doing that, it led into other things, like going off the production line and helping out with the schedule. Even though I didn't make as much money doing that, gave me a chance to get an actual inventory control job. And then when I was doing the inventory control work, I started doing computer programming on the side to make my scheduling jobs easier. Well, nobody else knew how to program the computer. I just figured that out because I like programming computers. And it made my job easier, which gave me more time to make improvements on the job, which got me promoted and got me other opportunities. And I've done that through my whole career. And that's how I got into teaching project management. I saw my boss, Mike Clark, was walking by one day and he was kind of stressed and he had a bunch of stuff under his arms. And he said, "Oh yeah, I just spent all day teaching this project management class and now I got to go and kind of do my regular job." And I asked him about that, how he came about doing that. And he said, "Well, we used to bring somebody in to do it, but we paid him too much." And I said, "I can do that. I'm going to do it." I said, "You need any help?" So I started helping him out. And then over the course of the next 5 years, I completely took it over from him. And I brought 2 or 3 other people in to help me do it. And so now I've got this skill of teaching a class. He taught me kind of how to organize the lessons. Now I've gotten really good at developing classwork. Well, now I can teach. And now I can sell that class. And it's all because I took a little thing I like to do, built it into my job, but kind of did it on the side. And now I have opportunities that have come to me because of that. So I did what I loved in a small way. And the money certainly followed. I can't say that I love every minute of every job I've ever had all day long. But by building some of that in, I've created all kinds of opportunities. And that's what my post-retirement career is going to be.
I think that's been something that I took with a lot of liberty for a while. And I think as of recent, I've kind of scaled it back a little bit and also learned that sometimes putting the pressure on doing something that you love for it to make money really removes joy from it and kills creativity. And so I've kind of been rewiring my thoughts about what I want, my work to be and what I want to do. And that's just been a really interesting rewrite because for the last few years, things have I've had a different vision for the way I want things to be. And that doesn't mean that I have to completely give that up, but I had to get real for recently. I think I had to get a little bit more realistic.
Yeah.
I guess. And there are a lot of things that I do love that I think I would love about going down a different path than I was intending to go down. And there's certain things like stability and structure and having coworkers that I would really enjoy, So,
well, that's part of what you discover too. You're doing what you love. You did what you love, and you figured something out. And as you keep figuring that out, and kind of keep, go back to chapter 4 and reset your goals. You'll find what you love, and you'll find that money follows it.
Yeah. Chapter 5, looking in the same direction.
Now that one is one that I actually changed the title of. That was a harsh lesson. Back when I originally wrote the original 7, or the Magnificent 7, many, many years ago, I was still married. And the title of that chapter would have been Never Stop Dating. And that's You've probably heard that expression before, and a lot of marriage counselors and advisors and people that think they know something about relationships will tell you, oh, never stop dating. And it's a great idea. It's easy after you get married and have kids and have jobs and have a lot of responsibilities, don't necessarily have time for that romantic relationship stuff. It's easy to just let that go. It can get crowded out. And I think it's important to bring that back, to capture romance, to woo your partner, your wife, or, your husband. I think that's really important, and people should do that. But it is not enough, and is definitely not the most important thing. Now, the other warning and the caveat I'll give here is you're talking to a divorced man. I only have history of failed relationships. But I've learned a lot, and I don't just fail and move on. I study, and I've been to counseling, and I've been to support groups, and I've read books on relationships. There's a whole section up here on that. And the conclusion I come to is this quote that's in the book, one of the most profound things I've ever read. I don't remember it exactly. Actually, can you read it?
Marriage isn't so much about gazing into each other's eyes over candlelight, but more about both of you looking in the same direction.
Exactly. And so for a while, I think I mentioned in the book, and your mother made this effort too when we were approaching the end of our marriage. We tried to start dating, tried to do that. But the direction that we wanted to go in with our lives was so different that it just didn't matter. It was, it was too late. All the romance in the world can't fix two people that are going in different directions, that want different things out of life.
Do you feel like from the start that you saw those different directions happening? Because I think that's where I fear entering a marriage, is that people say, well, people change. Oh, we didn't want the same things anymore. And like when you're young and in love, like I am, that's scary to think about that, and like how a lot of people didn't see it coming. Do you feel like when it came to
there were a few things we were looking in the same direction, but when I look back in retrospect, how I felt and how I thought and how I operated, there were red flags all over the place. It was 100% predictable. Now, everything is 100% predictable in the rearview mirror.
right? Oh, that was definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing is at the time I met your mother, because of the nature of how I was, I don't know, socially programmed. I was quite an introvert. I hadn't written this book. I hadn't studied everything that it takes to study. I was emotionally equipped to get involved in a relationship with somebody just like her. I was looking for a tiny little piece of what a person really should find in a life partner, and she was looking for a tiny little piece of what a person should really find in a life partner, and we each got that, and it worked for a while, but we didn't have everything. And I think the important message in there for young people especially, well, for everybody, but for young people in particular who don't quite have the perspective of all the things that can happen as you grow older with somebody, is to take the time to figure out that you really do want the same things out of life, that you really are moving in the same direction, that you really want the same lifestyle, that you want to operate the same way. The questions that I put in there that you should ask somebody, your mother and I never asked each other about that. We asked for one or two. We want to live on a lake. We love water sports. What we didn't talk about was the sacrifices we want to make for that. We didn't talk about all kinds of stuff that we should have talked about. And I think that's something, I think I put a line in there, probably the most important line in that chapter is, most importantly, it's at the end of the question section, most importantly, is the person you're involved with comfortable talking about the answers to these questions? If they're not, maybe just move on. Because if you can't talk about those things, well, that's the biggest red flag you can have.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that is interesting when I look back at previous relationships of my own. Now, granted, my relationships, I've had 3 serious relationships. One was 16 to 18. The other was 19 to 21. And then this current one, 23 until now. And they're all so different. And I think about like my first one, I really wanted us to be looking in the same direction, so I looked in his direction. I wanted the life that he wanted because he wanted it. Like, for example, when I went to go volunteer at the summer camp he was working at to be camp counselor for a week, I've never been to summer camp. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I jokingly say it was the worst week of my life. Certainly I've had worse weeks, but it was just like such a moment of, what am I doing here? And I went there because it was such an important place to him, and I wanted to see his world. I wanted to understand what was so important to him, why he wanted to spend the whole summer away from me to be there. And then I got there, and he still didn't look at me, and it was just like we weren't looking in the same direction. And of course now, however many years later, I was so like young and naive back then, and I know that I'm only 25 now, so I'll say that again about myself later. But our lives were going in completely different directions from that point on. Like, there was no world in which a relationship for the two of us would have worked anymore. But at the time, I was like, why is this happening? Why can't we be together? Maybe someday we'll be together again. And now I'm like, that's just never a life that I could see myself living. Yeah. And that wouldn't be fair to either of us. And then I think about my second relationship, and that was another one where I think it was more so from the other end that he wanted to look in the direction that I was looking because he wanted it to work. Yeah. And that was hard because I think I felt a certain level of guilt for knowing that we wanted different things and maybe trying to want what he wanted, thinking, well, maybe we can come to a compromise. Yeah. I said, I don't think I want to live in Minnesota. And he said, well, I grew up in Montana. Like, I want to move there. And I'm thinking, maybe. But then I looked up Montana and like, what do people move there for? And it's just really, it's not me. And that's completely fine. And I hope that is, if that's what he wants, that's still what he gets, and that he finds a partner that's what they want too. But then there was also the element where for me, I said, I want to go traveling. Mm-hmm. And he was like, yeah, me too. But it was because I wanted to. Yeah. It was, my idea was I want to go to all these other cultures and see the world. And he was like, we can road trip to another state. And so it was like, which is like, I'd love to do that too. But, we wanted to be looking in the same direction, that we tried to find a middle ground between where we were looking. Yeah. And eventually that just like couldn't work anymore. And I just had to go a completely different direction. And I'm glad I did. And that's, partially led me to my relationship now, and now we're physically on the opposite sides of the world, and I think that we are looking in the same direction. Yeah. But anyway, I think that that's a really good thing for people to learn, and a lot of people don't get any type of relationship advice in that way. Like people have the relationship that was modeled by their parents, and that's hard for me in a way because I don't feel like I have like an adult marriage that I've seen that's like happy and has worked out, and so that's a scary thing for me. But I also can see like why they didn't, like you and Mom's marriage, just looking at you as people, as individuals now, like so far removed, when you've both had time to like really create your own lives apart. I mean, it's been like 15 years. You're so different that for me it feels like, how did it ever work? And that's also because like time changes so much. But for some people, like the relationship that they've had modeled, like I much prefer it this way because you guys both are now happier, lighter human beings. And, I see some other people's parents that are still together. Some people that say like, yeah, my parents are together, but they need to get divorced. Like they hate each other. And that's just so sad for me because I'd much rather have the model of a relationship being like, you need to have a good relationship with yourself than like somebody whose relationship that has been modeled is like, you might be miserable, but you have to stick to it because you made a promise to God. Yeah. Or because, you can't admit, like you're too scared to leave. And like, that's something that I've also learned from that is like, if I'm looking in a different direction, I'd rather be looking in it alone. Yeah. And I'm really glad that I have that like security in myself to have learned that and be okay with that and like I wanted to be completely independent and happy and like have a very full life on my own. And that's something that I have really been able to learn how to do. And I think that a decent part of that is because my parents also did that. Well, and especially you have like really created a very full life for yourself. I could hardly get a hold of you for an hour tonight to record. I mean, booked and busy, schedules packed. So I think that's really important to learn. Yeah.
Well, there's I have great hope for you in your current relationship just because you are thinking and talking the way you do. I mean, that having that concern about it is what protects you. It keeps you going in the same direction. The other thing you've done is by traveling the world and being independent and alone and doing things that I cannot imagine doing. You've created a perspective in yourself that is so broad that it'll be harder for you to slip into some of the classic mistakes that young people make. And I think there's a couple of quotes. One of them came from this book, ironically called The Great Divorce. And it's not about divorce. It's an allegory about Christianity and heaven and hell. But one of the things it says in there is that people who claim to love are really craving to be loved. And if you're craving to be loved, it's really easy to look in somebody else's direction. And another quote I heard, I don't know if it's in a song or something like that, but it's something like, were they in love, or were they in love with the idea of being in love? Because who doesn't want to be in love? Who doesn't want to be in romance? Who doesn't want to be the quirky, funny banter in some of those romantic comedies? Everybody wants that. It just don't last.
Those movies end after an hour, so you can't keep it going.
Right. There's rarely a sequel. And that's why, and I'm all for romance. I'm all for the Disney movies and all that, but finding that person is rare. And I don't think it's because there aren't enough matches in the world. I think it's because we don't get enough training and enough support to be a complete individual before you go out and figure out how to attach yourself to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like there's so many, clever little sayings, like Tom Cruise saying to what's her name in that movie, "You complete me." That's a red flag right there, because that means he's a fixer-upper.
He's a fixer-upper.
It sounds romantic, but it's trouble.
Noted. So, chapter 6, treat your children like you won't have them tomorrow. Train them like they won't have you. We did talk about this a little bit before, but...
Yeah, well, I think we've covered that.
Yeah, I think that we've covered that a bit.
Heavy on the fun. I think there is something else I want to reiterate in there about showing up, because parenting is hard. A lot of people tell you that it's hard. It's the hardest job you ever do and things like that, which is certainly true if you do it right. But there's a big part about just showing up that I think is important. I talked about missing Tabitha's first dance recital because I had something else I wanted to do. And she told me I could. I don't know if a 40-year-old man ought to be taking advice from an 8-year-old girl. I said, "Oh yeah, Dad, go to your karate tournament. You don't need to come to my dance recital." She let me off the hook, but she didn't know that she wanted me there. Everybody wants their parents there. I think that's just built in, even if they hate their parents. So that's an easy thing to do, to treat your children like you won't have them tomorrow. Show up at the dance recital. Show up at the swim meet. Show up wherever it is. That's why I went to Hawaii last year when you were there.
I know, that was...
I just wanted to show up for you.
That was so selfless of you.
Yeah, but that's it's hard to do with schedules sometimes, but it's really easy to do. You don't have to, all you have to do is sit there and watch.
Yeah.
And remember, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I don't know if you ever had a concert or anything like that, but when you're up on that stage, you're scanning the crowd, you're looking, you're hoping, and then as soon as you find them, you think,
yeah.
But my heart breaks thinking about how there's kids whose parents never show up, and it's a really sad thing to continue to look for someone in a crowd that isn't going to be there, but you're going to look anyway, because sometimes they are.
Yeah. Maybe
they might show up this time, and it's kind of sad when you get yourself begging for, or just holding on to that last glimmer. But also, that's one thing. One of my coworkers a few weeks ago had asked for someone to cover her shift because her kid had a track and field day.
Oh. And
I was like, "Yep, I'll take it." Then the track and field day got rescheduled, and she's like, "Can you do this instead?" I said, "I'll rework some things, but yep," because to me, that's a parent that really wants to show up for their kid.
Yeah.
And I want to help that, because it sucks to be in that position when you're looking for your parent.
Yeah.
And And yeah, anyway, then it got rescheduled to a day I couldn't do it. But that's not my problem anymore.
At least you understand.
Yeah. So, 7th and final chapter, the more you give, the more you'll have.
Well, the reason I put that one at the end is because you just don't get it early. You have to be pretty mature to actually take this one to heart. Because most people, let's see, there's an expression about you got to make money to spend money. You got to spend money to make money. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at this. But a lot of people who don't give to charity, their excuse is, well, I don't have enough money. Maybe somebody gives to me. I'm a charity. I need this. I need that. It just doesn't work that way. And there's a natural law, a spiritual law in effect here that you can't do math on. You can't do the papers on. You can't give 10% of your income and say, okay, I'm going to multiply that by 100 and somehow that's going to come back, and then wait for the money to show up. Because it doesn't work like that. It works in ways that you can't see. It works in mysterious ways. And I don't care if it's money or time or switching a shift or doing this podcast so you can find, these messages to share with people. As long as you're finding a way to give of yourself, of whatever you have to give, it's going to come back at you. One way or another. And sometimes it comes back in opportunities, and sometimes it comes back in hard, cold cash. And I put examples of all those things in the book. When you're giving, stuff comes your way that you just can't imagine. I'm giving at PMI Minnesota. For the last several years, I've volunteered there, scheduling these events, doing stuff that's a little out of my skill set, a little out of my comfort zone. But I'm triggering so many opportunities just from doing this that are coming back at me. I can't, it's hard to describe. I almost have to go back and make a map of it. But that's the important thing and it's not just about charity, about giving money to charity or even doing volunteer work. It's about giving of yourself. Everybody's got a gift to give. Sometimes it's money. I'm fortunate now. I'm in a position where I have enough money where I can give away a lot of money, and I can give away a lot of time. But the most important thing I do, I used to volunteer at Feed My Starving Children, packing meals, and I used to volunteer at church, seating people and doing all that. Well, I quit doing that because it's not where my gifts are, And so now I'm getting into these teaching things. I'm flying down to Kansas City this weekend to go to this summer huddle for CAPS programs, which is programs that helps high school students launch into their career or whatever they're going to do after high school. I might be able to turn what I learn and discover there into a business, but I'm really just going there to give. I have something to give. I think I've got some life skills to teach high school students, and if I find a way to give to that, somehow I'll get paid back. I don't know how, and I don't care. I just have something to give, and so I'm going to go give because I know that the more I give, the more I'll have. So anyway, that's a chapter that's hard to take at first. It's hard to say, somebody at your age, probably barely, and a lot of people your age, just barely making enough to get by. I think, am I supposed to start giving money away? Yep, you are. And I got my own stories, but you search the internet, Google it. Find other stories of people like Tony Robbins, one of my favorite authors, talks about how he gave $20 away on a day to somebody who asked him for money in the street on a day when he didn't have any money. Before he started his multi-billion-dollar career, and that was when his life turned around. Is when he started giving away, and it's not just about giving money; it's of giving of himself. And there's all kinds of stories that prove that the math is wrong.
And that's an interesting point because you're somebody that's like really, really into your spreadsheets and everything, doing the math.
That's exactly right.
But so there are chapter 8 and 9. So I guess chapter 7 wasn't the last chapter, but it was the last of the Magnificent Seven. What? Did I say it right that time? Why can't I say it? Magnificent Seven. Chapter 8 is all you really need to know. And I like in this one that you say, all my life I've been a rule follower. I did what my parents, teachers, and bosses told me. I drove the speed limit. I got to work on time. I towed the line. I read and applied all the stuff you read in the self-help books. Except when I didn't. Sometimes I broke the rules. I took the last Pop-Tart and put an empty box back in the cupboard. I drank when I was a minor. I didn't study as much as I should have. I drove with expired tags. I was careless with girls. I removed the labels from my mattress. The point is, if following all these rules worked, I should have been a financially independent, self-made millionaire, married to a retired professional cheerleader by the time I was 40.
I had dreams.
But I wasn't. The point is, in spite of everything I experience, observe, study, and apply, there is more going on there than I can see. And that's a really, really important life lesson to learn, is that, like, there's always more that you don't know. And I try to apply that a lot when I think about, like, let's say, for example, someone cancels on me. That can be really frustrating. That can be hurtful, upsetting. You know, you can be angry. But I do always try to, like, see where they're coming from, understand, and think, like, there's a whole host of things going on that I know nothing about. And maybe it's not, and maybe it's a pattern, and in that case, then you need to reevaluate the relationship. But the thing is, like, when you get angry and worked up like that, the only person that it's, like, affecting most is you. Whereas, like, I found the most peace when I'm just like, okay, I understand. It's not going to work out.
That particular chapter is about my faith, but that's not all it's about. And you don't have to believe in God or have faith for that chapter to be meaningful. The important thing to remember about it, and it's also the important thing that I'm doing with this next phase of my life and this back-in-the-box consulting that I've told you about, is that all those rules, those are all good things to follow. And if you follow those 7 rules with discipline and focus and attention, it will address a lot of things in your life. It will create much good in your life, but it won't prevent the bad, and it won't make everything go according to plan. It'll create a serendipitous experience where stuff is going to happen to you that you could not possibly imagine. But all those things do is give you an anchor, a foothold, a solid place to stand no matter what happens. And if you do those things, you're going to have a lot of freedom to enjoy whatever comes your way. If you don't do those things, you're going to be so preoccupied with the chaos that comes out of not living according to some simple, basic principles that you won't have time for all the richness that can come into your life. And so, in my case, it's about following a simple set of rules and giving up the rest to God. For somebody who doesn't believe in God, it can be about following a simple set of rules to leave you with enough time and energy to take advantage of chance and opportunity that's going to come your way purely by random chance, if you believe in that. I don't believe in random chance. I believe everything happens according to a plan and a purpose. I just believe that I don't know what all that is. Somebody else is taking care of that. So ultimately the message is about, I'm going to do the best I can with those first 7 steps. The real richness and beauty of what my life becomes is because I let go of everything else. And just wait for life to flood back in. And it's working. That's why you had such a hard time getting an hour on my calendar.
Now, the final chapter is what I really meant to say. This one's pretty small. Do you want to sum this one up?
I just meant to say I love you.
I'm gonna cry.
That's all.
I think the fact that you wrote us an entire book tells us that you love us a lot. And that's a really, really special thing. And just so people know, in the appendix, he also made us a lot of lists in 7s. So, like, 7 of your favorite Bible verses, and 7 books to read to teach you about life, 7 of your favorite quotes from famous people, 7 movies, 7 of my favorite quotes from movies.
There's 7 extra lessons in there too, weren't there?
Yeah. I didn't read them all. But anyway, this is really, really special. I'm really happy that it's for us. And, you know, we did talk a lot about the book and go through it. And there's a part of me that has wanted to, like, keep this, like, I wanted to gatekeep it, you know? I wanted it to be just for us, but it's also something really special that I think, you know, not everybody gets to have a dad this great. And maybe they just get to have an 1.5-hour podcast episode with somebody else's dad who's really great. And anyone can apply these things. And I'm really, really grateful for you. And you're the most important person in my life. And so I really, really wanted to have you on the podcast.
Well, thanks, George. I really appreciate what you're doing. I think what you're trying to share here, not just because it's me, but because of all the things
This is genius, by the way. This is genius stuff.
all the things that you're sharing as you go through your travels and your experiences and your own heartbreaks, and share those lessons with other people. I think that's important. That's part of that lesson 7. The more you give, the more you'll have. And I know you're thinking about taking a little bit direction, just as long as you keep giving. And this is truly giving it yourself. And I think it's hard to believe right now, but it's going to show up for you in ways that you can't imagine.
I hope so. I'm going to have to start reapplying some of these principles. I've been slacking on chapters 1 through 7.
That's why I made the book short and easy to read.
I think it's about time for my yearly read. I didn't really hear anything about why I'm your favorite child, but that's fine.
Well, you're my favorite because you're making me famous. I feel like a celebrity today.
And I'm going to cut it off after you're my favorite. Sorry, Tabitha, Dominic, and Kiara.
Yeah, well, at least at least I'll have plausible deniability, because I'll say, I don't know how she edited that out.
Anyway, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Dad. I am excited to have you on again sometime.
Oh, I have a lot to say.
And I'm cutting him off, believe me.
Thanks, Alexa.
Yeah. I love you so much, and
I love you too, George, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Dad.
Good night, everybody.
That's what we got.